We're now going to get a chance to see how people from outside the industry respond to all of the changes that are taking place in our panel discussion, where we have a media agency planner, 3 of the biggest clients in the country, and our very own Vanessa Clifford. Please welcome John O'Donnell.
Good morning, everyone out there and everyone here as well. Well, welcome, obviously, to everyone to the British Library. I think it's a fitting place, and also those of you who may have forgotten to return your King James Bible should probably fess up now. But it is quite fitting that we're here because I think, you know, the British Library are going through changes the same as us. I mean, they are actually the only place, I believe, in the UK that currently keeps stocks of every single national newspaper every single day. And obviously one of the changes for them is that they're now looking at how they keep the digital versions of newspapers and how they store that. And I think for us, as news brands, I think these are part of the real key changes that have been happening. You know, talking to some of you earlier on, I mean, it was pretty clear. Not very long ago, a typical media plan would be sort the telly and the print out, and then maybe a little bit of outdoor, and that was kind of it. And things have changed hugely since that particular point. And so the big question about audience, I think, is the key one. And for that, you know, the big question of this particular forum is print or screen? Who cares? Does anyone actually care? Well, hopefully we'll get to the bottom of that. But first of all, why don't I introduce my esteemed panel here. First of all, at the end here, we have Simeon Adams, who is a partner at Good Stuff. Hello, Simeon. Simeon has a very rounded career, actually, in media agency, media owner, full-service agency and creative agency, so probably just client, actually, that you need there to finish the lot off. Most notably, most of you might know Simeon from being Group Planning Director of MEC, but he also knows newspapers pretty well, given that he was actually Head of Planning at Metro for some time, in charge of all their creative solutions. After a stint at BBH, Simeon then joined his current role, where he joined Good Stuff, and Good Stuff are current reigning campaign agency of the year. So well done. Vanessa Clifford is Client Services and Strategy Director at Newsworks. Most of you might know Vanessa from her time as Head of Publishing at Mindshare and her role within the Group M team. I certainly do. What you might not know is that she did actually cut her teeth on the client side as a media manager for British Rail. Get her. Obviously now she's at Newsworks, and her role is, as you would expect, championing news brands and their role within clients and agencies. Then we have Lizabeth Fagin, who's Marketing Director of Boots. And to be fair, Lizabeth can't just get enough of Boots, can you? This isn't the first time she's been there, as prior to her current role, Elizabeth was actually there some 16 years ago as a group buyer. And in the middle of this, she actually did a fairly lengthy stint of 10 years over at DSG. Elizabeth is also a past president of Wackle. Jan Gooding, is Global Marketing Director of Aviva. And Jan has spent some 25 years in advertising and marketing, I know. So starting out in creative agencies, moving on then to being a managing partner at 2 marketing consultancies, working on clients such as BBC and Diageo and Unilever. To then move on to client roles, where she spent some time at BT and British Gas, and now finds herself, as I say, as Group Marketing Director of Aviva, overseeing the whole of North America, Europe and the Asia Pacific. And not much to do there, really, is the chat. And last but by no means least, of course, Angela Porter, who is Head of Food Advertising at Tesco, where she's been for 2 years, and as you can imagine, she's probably been quite busy recently. She's also had a spell at Vodafone and Hovis and Diageo before that. So as you can see, there is an awful lot of big brands around here. So I'm going to be hugely controversial, as you would expect for my budgets to allow. Right, why don't we kick off and ask you first of all, we talked a bit about change and about how things are affecting media, but what I'd quite like to know from all of you, if we can maybe just keep it to about a minute, is what's the single most sort of defining change that's happening in your business at the moment? So why don't we start with you, Simeon?
Start with me. I'm not sure about change. I might cop out from answering the question, go early. But a challenge rather than change, very selfishly. I can't imagine it's a huge problem for the likes of Tesco's, but recruitment is a problem for us. So Good Stuff for the many people here that won't know. Very small agency, fewer than 30 people, growing very rapidly. We need to hire people, and we need to hire people. I think generalist isn't a great word, but we need to hire people with a great strategic and creative understanding. yeah, sort of all-rounders, if you will. And I think the problem that we face is that sort of the larger network agencies that we steal people from are very good at developing sort of silos of people, silos of very, very good specialists. So the kind of notion of good all-rounders who have that great kind of cross-channel, cross-platform understanding of how consumers consume media is a bit of a rarity. And I think, I guess my tenuous parallel with the theme of the conference is I think it's a problem that news brands face as well. Primarily, I don't know what the exact figure is, 85% of revenue into news brands comes from selling rectangles on print.
Sure.
And even though you've got some great expertise within individual silos, what you don't have is a sort of great wealth of people that can kind of think across platform, across channel.
And do you think, just staying on that very briefly, I mean, do you think that, as a kind of litmus test for the industry, really, I mean, do you think the talent coming in is greater than it was 10 years ago or different? Or, I mean, are you finding that you think it's going to be in rude health going forward?
I think it shows promise. Yeah, I mean, we obviously recruit in small numbers, so it'll be a very small sample. But there seems to be some equally bright individuals in the industry coming into the industry now as there was, well, maybe not when I joined, 'cause obviously I'd be the exception that proves the rule. But yeah, I mean, you know, we have cause for hope. But like I said, that kind of the pool of cross-platform, cross-channel thinkers definitely seems to be sort of reduced in comparison to what it was 6 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Ness, change or challenge?
Okay, so I guess I'm answering for the industry here, aren't I?
I think you are.
The change is started longer ago than 3 years ago, but it's the fact that the audience isn't where the audience used to be. They used to be nicely contained, didn't they, to those bits of paper. So the big changes is they're all over the place, and they're doing whatever they want to do when they want to do it. Our big challenge with that, so it's a bit of both, is that I don't think we're keeping up with them. I think we know where they are, back to your silos. We know where they are when they're in the online bit of it. We know where they are on the mobile bit of it. What we don't know is are they the same people? Are they different people? How are they moving during the course of the day? And I think that's our big change and challenges is we've got to catch up with that because they're way, way ahead of us, the normal people. You know, the people like we are normally in our day-to-day lives. We're moving between bits of the brand and we as an industry can't track that properly yet and we need to get smart at it and get smart quick.
Sure. Lizabeth?
I guess it's the same actually as the challenge that Simon and others outlined this morning is we're a retail business but we're a very big brand and it's actually how do you take the organisation digital, not digital just in the context of how do you access your customers digitally, which is a big challenge, but actually how do you then think digitally and how do you make sure the investment that you're putting into the online space, not just because you have to have an e-commerce shop but all the content that you're creating. So it's actually how do you take the organisation digital? And then secondly, alongside that is then in that digital world that you're operating in, how do you then make sure you are in touch with your customers in the right way? I'm being honest, managing multiple agencies to try and access customers when you know, the days of one big creative agency or one lead agency have gone. And you know, we work with probably 6 or 7 different agencies in the media space and the creative space, and they're merging together. And that provides a challenge because how do you reorganize internally across, you know, we've got a big loyalty program, you know, we've got we are a media owner because we have Boots WebMD and other assets that we sell. So actually it is the whole digital question and how do you set yourself up both internally and with your partners to make sure that you're effective and efficient going to your customers.
Sure. I mean, I think that's one of the really interesting things about that Twitter has kind of exploded, is that the CRM is right there in front of you. You know, if your customers don't like you or if they do, you know about it almost instantly, whereas in the past it was probably a slight disconnect. So it's really interesting to see how...
We don't have a Twitter account, so to the point about, you know, we don't have a Twitter account, and that doesn't mean to say our customers aren't talking to us. We have Facebook and we have a 24/7 contact centre because that's the nature of the business that we have. And there is a lot of self-moderation goes on. So talking earlier about how do you... There's lots of conversations about the brand, some of it stimulated by articles that appear in your newspapers that create a lot of conversation that we have to moderate. But customers do it. If your brand is strong enough, customers will actually manage your brand in the online space for you in many instances.
Yeah. Aviva?
Yes, I suppose for us there's a challenge and an opportunity that the challenge is undoubtedly to be a brand in the financial services sector at the moment is difficult. We're generally not trusted as a sector, and it was very disappointing for me when I did some research last year, including Poland and Singapore, because I know we tend to be a bit UK-centric. Actually, this feeling that financial services brands are rigged in favour of us and not the customer is a tremendous problem for us. And when we're in an economic climate where actually for consumers the realities of recession are in many ways only landing now, that's a very difficult context against which to work, because we're trying to encourage people to save and think about the future when inflation is higher than interest rates and we haven't covered ourselves in glory. But the opportunity is frankly you know, to become a digital insurer and do great things for our customers to make their lives easier and more intuitive is a huge opportunity to sort of help us get out of jail. So I feel a little bit like when I worked at BT, and it was like, well, the bad news is fixed line phones are going to die, but the good news is you're sitting on the broadband network. I feel a little bit like that at the moment about what a gift digital is to us. You know, suddenly we're able to offer apps on phones that will rate the way in which you drive, which means potentially you could reduce your premium when it comes to claiming. Suddenly we can make it easier for people if you've been diagnosed with cancer, which is an enormously difficult moment for people. Actually, counterintuitively perhaps at that moment, they don't want to talk to one of our wonderful members of staff, but they'd rather get the process going online whilst they absorb the shock, and it often happens in the middle of the night or 3 in the morning, as I'm sure you can imagine. So becoming a digital insurer is a huge opportunity for us to to sort of win back the trust and faith of our customers.
Sure. Angela?
I think from a retail point of view, we're facing very similar kind of challenges to the media world. It used to be, to your point, TV, press and a bit of outdoor, and you'd hit your customer audience with a message that was really clear for them. I think what we're finding more is as buying behaviour changes and people have higher and higher expectations of all of the brands that they touch, we've got to be more savvy and smarter about touching them in the right places with the right messages. So as we try to kind of diversify from a media point of view and work out what to say where, we've also got to think about, well, from a Tesco point of view, we've got a very diverse portfolio in terms of our store sizes and how people shop. So the challenge that we've got is making sure we're talking to people about what they want to hear in the right places. So the way that you would talk to an Express customer right outside an Express store is completely different to the way that you might want someone to engage with your brand on a Sunday morning when they're having a tea and croissant and really taking their time to maybe be more open to quality messages from the brand. So in terms of the complexity of mapping that out across the media world, it's a really big challenge for us at the moment.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's sort of some themes developing here, because I think nearly all of us are faced with how do we use digital and how do we use it with our current models, because I think everybody now realises that digital isn't actually, you know, spelling the death of anything. I think, you know, the smart people is how you use digital with what you're currently doing. Now, obviously, that's a key thing for us, and one of the things that we know as news brands is that, you know, people use different platforms in different ways, but they're still the same people. They use the iPad at a particular time of day, and they'll still sit down with the Sunday papers in a particular way. All of these different things play a part. But I mean, just sticking with the guys on the client side first of all, if I mean, when you're actually sort of planning campaigns and when you're looking at, I suppose, this sort of consumer path to purchase, if you like, I mean, do you actually care when you look at a news brand about whether or not it is a print or whether it's a screen-based thing? I mean, Lizabeth, you want to?
Yeah, because customers engage with a print product in a different way to they engage with a non-screen product. So, you know, resonate with some of the comments we made earlier. You're looking at the environment you're going to place your communication in. The product is that you are communicating, so whether it's a high-end beauty product or it's a co-baby product, you're kind of looking at that. You're looking at how do mums engage with newspapers relative to how do mums engage online. So you really are looking at quite closely who are the audience, what is the product you're selling, and therefore what's the right medium to put it in. And you don't, you don't just think, well, it's a news brand and therefore it doesn't really matter what medium it's in. It's actually how our customers are going to interact with that news brand in the particular medium.
So it's a big creative job as well then, really, isn't it? Because, I mean, the days of creating one piece of copy for absolutely everything, or taking the TV ad and effectively just taking a still from it, I mean, you know, it's all about that audience of one more than it's ever been before. So I suppose from that point of view, you have to be much cleverer with the creative and much more bespoke. I mean, how do you find at Tesco that sort of...
I think it's about, it would depend on your end result. So the way that you would potentially use a piece of publication or print would be to hopefully drive people to be aware of an offer or message and then go and react in a store environment. Versus in the online space, there could be multiple objectives. So from driving someone directly through to click through and buying on one of our .com or grocery sites, to just raising awareness and then driving them into store. So I think for me, it's about mapping out the whole journey. It's not about print on one hand, digital on the other, with a bit of TV on top. It's about understanding what the end objective to that audience is, and then using the right channels just to influence them in the right way the whole way along the journey. Okay,
so essentially, I mean, if a title like The Telegraph, for example, or the group of The Telegraph, or whether it's ourselves, I mean, if they come to you with an audience, I mean, that's more interesting these days, really, than actually just saying, well, these are a bunch of formats that might do different things.
Yeah, and it's about looking at it both together, because the relationship that our consumers will have with news brands will be very personal, and there's a reason that they engage with the news brands in the same way as there is a reason that they engage with any brand. And I think that much as the relationship might be different in terms of where their mindset is when they're engaging with a print brand versus digital brand, they still have the same type of relationship with that brand. So it's, from a retail point of view, it's making the most of that and kind of, to a certain extent, playing on that with what we're saying to our customers.
Yeah, sure. Jan, do you care whether it's print or screen?
Well, I was just going to say, you've been kind enough to remind everyone how long I've been in the business. And I recall as a graduate trainee in Ted Bates, the very first assignment I had was, could you please write an essay that builds the case for cinema now that VHS is here? You know, because we tend to get into these very cataclysmic moments where we go, this has arrived, so, you know, the whole world has changed. And having worked on a number of sides of the fence, we are quite unsentimental in a ghastly sort of way about brands, and that's because we suffer the reality of our customers being a bit unsentimental about us. So you go back to the first principles of what is the task. And we have certainly found, for instance, with the Telegraph, when we had a particular task, we want to raise the profile of street children being an issue, street children on the school, and it was our CR programme. We want to raise awareness of the issue, get people contributing money. We teamed up with the Telegraph, and their journalists went out to India as well as Glasgow, did a whole piece. They were able to produce video, so we had rich media. So actually, it was thinking of, you know, a good old-fashioned, what's the task, what's the brief as a whole. It's not just madly chasing audiences either. You're actually going back to the basics of what are we trying to achieve and what's the best way of getting there. And we were enormously pleased with the results of that, because the subject matter was going to require engagement, and the credibility and authority of the Telegraph and their journalists and the way they went about doing that was really, really important to us.
I think the interesting, thing about that is I think newspapers and news brands have had to really grasp the nettle that it's not all just about space and 25/4s and so on. I think the majority of people now understand that it is about creating proper partnerships and finding out, you know, what the solution is first of all, before then sort of going, well, we can flog you this and we can flog you that. And I think it's become much more, well, I hope it's become much more collaborative. It certainly sort of feels that way. I mean,
I feel the one thing I've sort of taken out of this morning, and I have to say I'm delighted that you invited me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I love seeing you all get back onto the front foot, because I am a brand person.
Well, I suppose the question really is, I mean, do you think that you're using news brands differently now to what you were, say, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that? I mean, are there different mechanics? Do you view things differently? Are the relationships different?
I suppose we know the news people less than you would have done. I think as clients, we were talking about this earlier. I mean, I don't think it's just that I came from the agency background, so you tended to know the people, but I think, and our media agency is wonderful, by the way, so this is not a dig at them, but I think our lives are so much more complicated. As marketeers, we are required to be involved across the organisation in a way that maybe 10 years ago we weren't. I mean, a CMO these days is not just the colouring in department. We've spent 10 years going, we're not just the colouring in department. Well, the good news is we're not regarded as the colouring in department. We are regarded as people who are going to help drive the business strategy. And that means we frankly have even less time than we had before to develop the personal relationships. But at a brand level, I do think it's very important working in partnership and really understanding what motivates people, why they're doing what they're doing, and how can we capture that moment in a constructive way. I was riveted that only half people clicked on ads. I think it was said this morning. Well, actually, for us, can you imagine the idea that somebody could be browsing on a tablet and actually click right through and complete the purchase there and then is completely magical from our point of view, because we're trying to make the whole journey, as you're saying, as easy as possible. And in insurance, essentially, we're selling a digital promise. A policy is a digital promise. So to be in this digital world is enormously exciting for us.
My response to your questions, I think we're trying to work differently with news brands and print brands particularly. I think it's quite hard, and we would all point to the exceptions where we've had some limited success. We've got some work going on with the Metro at the moment, which is a good piece of work and is taking advertising outside of just normal advertising. But I do feel, and it was great today to see editorial and commercial on the platform, although the Guardian have gone, but actually she still said commercial and felt that she was swearing in the same room because she's editorial. And that just kind of indicates some of the challenges that we still face. It's almost, there's a kind of position that perhaps editorial have to take to how they feel to retain their integrity, whilst recognising that actually between the customer and the brand, if they work really closely together, no one wants to ever question editorial integrity, but there is a greater opportunity. And I think newspaper brands have still got a long way to go in actually helping us think outside of the box. And I agree with what Jan said, and it's not a slight on any of our agencies, but there are some media partners who can get closer to clients, and newspaper brands still work quite far back from clients, and I think that puts them at a disadvantage, particularly in the digital space, because the clients know more about their digital assets than any media agency will, because they're working with them, living with them. That's part of their customer offer now. It's not just about the shops we have, it's actually the assets we have online as well. So I think there's a greater opportunity. What's reassuring about the conversations and the presentations today is it feels like there is more and more of that going on, and brands that one thought might never come together with editorial and commercial actually talking about it on the screen was rather promising. Yeah, well, I must have just about to mention, I mean, John Lloyd's fantastic piece earlier on was a great example of what I see happening now compared with what happened a long time ago. And I just think editorial and commercial people have become more collaborative. I mean, my own experience, I remember at the Evening Standard, it kind of almost happened overnight, where of course you lose a cover price, you have to create revenue elsewhere. And I think it's trying to work out what the boundaries are. I mean, you're effectively like two old prize fighters wandering around the wing, and it's just literally trying to work out where the boundaries are. And I think news is sacred. You don't mess with news, but I think everything else is potentially there for a conversation. And I think, you mentioned there about, certain, editorial visits abroad to look at certain campaigns. I mean, I think the brilliant thing about newspapers is they are fabulously campaigning. I mean, if you look at some of the things that we wouldn't have, things like the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, things like, the dispossessed funds from the Standard, Pride of Britain from the Mirror, all these kind of things wouldn't happen. And I think, it's about becoming more collaborative along these, because I think commercial clients can help newspapers achieve their goals in the same way that I think as newspapers and news brands and digital stuff, we can help you achieve your goals. So I think it should be a kind of, symbiotic process. And
I think the collaboration has to exist between kind of traditional print and digital worlds as well, because we still, I think, all compartmentalise them a little bit, and the understanding and trust that as a client you have in print is very different to that of digital, because we've got 20 or 30 years worth of research on what it does and whether left-hand pages work better than right-hand pages and all of the science that goes behind it. And much as that's starting to exist in digital, it's just not there yet. We don't have that understanding. So I think from a media owner point of view, having the collaboration between the more traditional paper-based publications or offerings and the new digital world, and how they work together is something that, as an industry, we need to step into.
Yeah, very good. I just want to bring you guys in. I mean, Simeon, you know, Good Stuff do some fantastic work around this space. I mean, what's your view from the agency, and I suppose the full-service agency view in this as well?
Well, I was going to raise the same point as Angela, really. I think, I think it is improving. It is getting better, certainly from my days on the other side of the fence. But it just feels like it's happening really slowly. So, I mean, it also feels like commercial are innovating far faster than editorial are as well. So someone mentioned, this chap here from Dare, mentioned Blipper and kind of making editorial leap off the page and integrating print editorial with mobile or digital platforms better. And I think, you know, I see examples of it in sort of commercially, so shop lads or you know, just more involving, more creative, more kind of integrated advertising ideas. But sort of editorially, it feels like a lot of news brands are missing a trick, and they're great at developing. Again, I said it earlier, great at developing their sort of siloed platforms, but not so great in kind of integrating them and sort of cross-pollinating. To use a slightly wanky expression. But that wasn't your question, was it? Did I answer your question?
You've not answered any of them, to be fair.
No.
But that's all right. Ness, obviously you've... I don't want to use the phrase poacher turned gatekeeper, but I've used it. So, obviously, moving from the playful badinage across the Group M table to the other side, I mean, what are the big differences that you've seen now, sort of championing print?
Oh, well, I don't get to speak about the numbers anymore. Well, I speak about the numbers, I don't speak about the money anymore, which is remarkably freeing, I would like to say. And it's worth having a go at it, I promise you. But, and it allows you to take a step back slightly. It's like back kind of into the middle. I don't think I've quite come over and quite joined the other side yet. I'm somewhere between poacher and gamekeeper. I haven't decided what I am yet. But it does let you look at both sides with some kind of slightly clearer and not kind of down in all the detail about it. And I am going to end up slightly like I am banging on about this whole audience and measurements and side like that thing. But I am going to continue to do so, because I think that's the bit that is the clearest thing that's coming out of the change that I've made, is that I think from an agency side, I think we're all in the danger sometimes of getting so caught up in wondering about how we're going to trade things and who they are and what someone might charge us for something, that we aren't quite looking at it clearly and allowing some of the measurement and metrics to move forward as to how we can kind of figure out who this audience is. As I said before, we need to do this. We need to do it quite quickly, else we're going to kind of do this great industry down. And we keep worrying, or from an agency side, everyone keep worrying so much as, if we agree to measure it like that, does that mean they're going to charge us some more for it? And there's always that is in the background, and I think everyone should be a little bit braver about that. Kind of take a step back from it. That'll get worked out. It's kind of what drives all of our businesses in this room. We will figure out the financial side. It always happens. Sometimes painfully, sometimes not. But I think we need to take a deep breath, step back from it and go, what is the best way to do this to everyone's best thing? How do we measure the consumers and what are they doing? How do we do it so you guys have more confidence in digital platforms? How do we rapidly get ourselves 20 years worth of information and knowledge of audience and how they're consuming these different brands? Because I do genuinely think we do, and I think we're slowing ourselves down as an industry at the moment, terribly.
No, I think that's fair, and it's kind of echoing what you said, really, and that we are becoming more collaborative, and we're trying to become more creative, but we're not, we still need to sort of push it on a little bit, which is exactly the same as Simeon saying that. I mean, do you find, from, you're going to have to probably talk about it, really, but I mean, obviously, when, Horsegate occurred, exactly, don't mention the horse, no. But I think it's a really good example because you guys, didn't shy away from it. You were straight there, front and centre the moment it happened, and you were very keen to acknowledge it. You were keen to apologise for it and to talk to your consumers about it. And news brands did seem to form a pretty big part of that. I mean, was that the case from a...
I mean, there was no shying away from it. I think everyone will have read the reports and understand where we were coming from. It was more about us trying to be on the front foot and be very open and transparent with our customers. To the point I made earlier, as people's expectations get higher and higher, they're demanding more of a kind of collaborative relationship with the brands that they're dealing with. If we'd shied away from that, it would have been all over Facebook, Twitter. People would have made their own minds up. had their own judgment, we wouldn't have been able to control the conversation in an honest way. So for us using news brands and actually using print in particular, the campaign was built around print and social, was to allow us to do that. It was to go out there with a very transparent and honest conversation, and the creative led to that as well. And then manage and develop the conversation socially and answer the questions and try and be as honest as we could with customers. I think what was interesting in the way that we approached that is we started originally with a piece of beautifully crafted copy that simply said, we're sorry, we'll get better, and that's the stance that the business are still taking. And that just didn't work in tabloids, so we looked at some of the red tops and we thought, that's not the right language and it's not the right tone of voice for that customer base. So we cut it back, we stripped it back, and we made it just a bit simpler. But we still went out on all of the broadsheets with our kind of slightly more crafted conversation. And interestingly, that was the piece of work that really got the talkability and the PR and the social mentions. It was the piece that went out there kind of speaking to us and speaking to the industry that allowed that honest conversation to really get its own kind of viral effect. And then you start to get to the stage of that's not us talking to customers, that's customers talking to customers about something that they've seen, and that just has even more credibility. So it plays a really big part in, as I said earlier, the relationship that people have with news brands is something that I think as a brand you can play on when times are needed.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, regardless of the things that have gone on, I mean, newspapers are still fantastically trusted sources of information, which is why, you know, as I say, it's good to hear that you chose that as a vehicle. We've just got a few minutes left, so I thought I just wanted to finish by just asking you one-word answers only, if that's all right, because I will be shot if I don't ask the big question. But print or screen, do we really actually care? Simeon?
Yes, I care passionately because it's my job.
Okay, right. Good work then. Okay, so yes over there. Vanessa?
We shouldn't, so no.
Good, okay.
Yes.
Yes?
No.
No?
Depends on the task.
Excellent, right. So a real definitive answer from the panel there. Well done. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and coming. I think it's been really, really interesting. Some fantastic thoughts. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks very much.